Good morning and welcome to Retirement Tax Matters. I'm Adam Reed. This is Garrett Crawford, our resident CFP. How are we doing this morning, Garrett?
Doing pretty good. Today, the Masters starts. So by the time that this releases, we'll know who the winners are. But I'm ready for those birds to chirp today in the background. You know, as they do the pan across the azaleas at Augusta National. I know for me, spring has officially started when the Masters are on. So I'm excited about watching that.
Well, you know, it's funny. You would think maybe CPAs have like lobbied for moving it back a weekend so they can enjoy the festivities. But I would say we got a buddy yesterday. I was at a networking event and I said, "Where's Andy?" And they said, "Oh, he's nose of the grindstone." He's one of our CPAs we refer to. And then my dad and brother, both CPAs. So I don't think they'll be enjoying the Masters as much as maybe we are, some of our listeners.
Yeah, sure. I think it's like the 1 week of the year that Adam and I we have TVs that we present on. Adam has one over here. I have one in my office. And we're both sports guys, but it seems like the Masters is the 1 week where we've got that TV on mute. And, you know, even if you aren't following the game, it's just kind of it's a better than a Microsoft or Mac screensaver. It's beautiful there. If anybody that's out there has strings to pull, I've entered the Masters lottery now for like 7 or 8 years and still haven't won it. I've had my brothers. We've all been teaming up. But one day we'll have to do a guest Retirement Tax Matters at Augusta National. Garrett
wrote me in last year. He said, "Hey, sign up for it." He said, "If you get the tickets, I'll pay you. We'll take you whatever you want to do." So but for whatever now.
Yeah,
so.
We hired Adam just so we'd have one more extra chance at getting to Augusta National. But I'm looking forward to that this week.
Yes, sir. So, well, I think the topic for today should be a lot of fun. I think it kind of double clicks on something that maybe a lot of people have been thinking as they followed along with us. We talk a lot about Roth conversions. We're big fans. Right place, right time. You know, it's a good tool in the tool belt. But for a lot of people, Roth conversions make sense. But the weird thing, or maybe the interesting thing about a lot of the people we work with in this $2 million to $8 million space is the reason they're in that position is not necessarily because they built this huge flashy business and have lived this extravagant lifestyle, but a lot of them are in this position because they've lived within their means year after year after year. They saved really well. Maybe they had a good paying job, and so now they've got maybe a healthy Social Security, a spousal benefit as well, maybe even a little bit of a pension. We've got some residual pensions that are still coming in.
Still out there.
And, they're still living within their means, and they're kind of in this 22% tax bracket, and it's kind of this, it almost feels like a no man's land, but I think we're going to touch on today why it isn't a no man's land. But it feels like, well, I don't really want to convert up into 24, but I'm never going to be down in 12, but gosh, we don't want to touch 32. How are you helping clients think through the 22 and 24% tax bracket? It's funny, the golden window, the 2% window. We've all got all these windows in tax planning, but how do you help people think through that 22 and that 24% tax bracket? Because I think a lot of the people listening land in that space into and then through their retirement.
Yeah. So let's start with the kind of niche person that we think about as we're talking through these topics are people that are, retirement is in the horizon. And so you're thinking about retirement, or you're recently retired or retired, and you've got a net worth somewhere between 2 and 8 million. Why do we pick those kind of arbitrary numbers? Is because that can sometimes be for those people that are before these federal estate tax levels, but also high enough that the way that you're processing retirement is probably very different than a majority of your coworkers. And so one of the tenets of this group of people that are listening, the $2 to $8 million, is you probably have saved more than your peers. Maybe you live in a nice neighborhood and maybe, people around you are about the same level. But in general, most people have not saved between 2 and 8 million. And there can be this, the way I'd like to frame it is just because you have high savings or because you're between 2 and 8 million, that does not necessarily mean that you have high income or a high standard of living. In fact, Adam and I see all the time where the high net worth retirees, they got that way because of what you just said. They've lived on less than they've earned and they've saved a lot, and can actually be a psychological kind of wealth psychology issue where you just aren't used to spending a lot because you're used to saving a lot. And so just because you have a high net worth does not mean you have a high income level or a high standard of living. And so what we find is that retirees between 2 and 8 million oftentimes have a retirement living expense or an income level that will put them in this 22 or 24% tax bracket. And I don't even know if I shared this with you, but it's funny you said the word no man's land. That was what kept coming up with me yesterday as I thought about these two tax brackets, because as a high net worth retiree, you've probably been in that 22 or 20, it used to be 24, 25% tax bracket probably for a long time. And I think the hard part for people is I've never been in a 32% tax bracket, or at least back in the day, a 35% tax bracket. So I bet, if I play my cards right, I should never be in a high 30% tax bracket. So let's kind of play the long game, use tax deferred IRAs, 401ks, and my retirement tax level will maybe one day be lower than my working tax level. Good in theory. But I think I'd probably bring it back, and we can talk more specifically here in a second, but because you're a high net worth retiree, you're going to find yourself in this 22 and 24% marginal tax bracket. And I think for a lot of you can even end up in the 22% tax bracket. And this fear of, and people heard it their whole life, like, we want to do a Roth conversion up to the next tax bracket. Well, when you're in the 22% 22% federal tax bracket, the next one is only 24%. So that's an additional 2%. And I think it'd probably be a better time now than ever just to get these numbers out here. But if you're a married filing jointly on your tax return in 2026, the 22% tax bracket starts at $100,801 and goes all the way up to $211,400. The 24% tax bracket starts at $211,401 and goes all the way up to $403,550. And so I'm stereotyping here a little bit, but I can see a lot of people in this niche of 2 to 8 million, their income being somewhere between $125,000 a year up to maybe $250,000 a year. And so if your income is at $250,000 and you could go all the way up to $400,000 in the 24% tax bracket, married filing jointly, that's what we're talking about, just a 2% difference. And should you take advantage of that? And then real quick, for single people, 22% tax bracket starts at $50,401 in 2026 and goes up to $105,700. And then the 24% tax bracket starts at $105,701 and goes up to $201,775. So big difference here. Married filing jointly and single, and maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned, and I don't know, every couple months, hey, should we look into this designation or like some tax? I think at some point we need to sign up to get like a psychology class or something, so we can be doctors of therapy or something, because a lot of what we talk about has so much to do with the psychological makeup of clients. And I'll tell you a story from where I came from, the old firm that I was at. We had a client who $42 million in a brokerage account. And I was like, oh my goodness, it must have been inherited. Nope, all saved. Surgeon saved all of it, all of his income. They were living on close to nothing every year, but they were happy that, there was nothing wrong. And it blew my mind. $42 million. They're in their 70s. He's still working. He was about to retire, and the wife looked us dead in our eyes, most serious face I've ever seen, and said, do you think we'll have enough money? I said, you've got too much money, but that's how we feel, And so a lot of these people that we're talking about that have saved and lived below their means, they're thinking, well, I have enough. Is this okay? And so how do you help clients navigate that conversation of, I've saved, I've lived within my means, probably because I have an idea of what I need to retire. But now that I'm retired, how is actually spending too little maybe going to cause some landmines in the tax planning field into retirement?
Sure. So I've had two cases recently where people, type A personalities, high achievers, I don't know all the Enneagram stuff, but there's like a group of people out there
Mm-hmm.
that if you say, the stereotypical, how high to jump, they want to know how high.
Mm-hmm.
They will try to meet your expectation, and they're just diligent, hard workers. And a lot of people that find themselves in this $2 to $8 million range, that could be you. And so that's just a hard thing to change. And I've seen where people that are aggressive savers earlier in their life, and they continue to save throughout their life, they will build an IRA, a brokerage account up to a few $1,000,000, and then they get to retirement, and the idea of spending money just goes against everything that they've been accustomed to. And so they'll have $2 or $3 million in an account, but they'll be generating, $2,000 or $3,000 a month to supplement their Social Security benefits. And so what happens is that compound interest in investing kind of gets out of hand, and it becomes non-intuitive. And so the balances on the investment account start growing at, let's say an average of 7 or 8% per year, and the spending does not even come close to matching the compounded growth in the investments. And I think as humans, it's hard for us, they always say we can maybe kind of imagine like what $1 million is. When you make that jump from 1 million to let's just say 100 million, our brains kind of go haywire thinking about what $100 million really is. Like, how many cars can you buy with $100 million? I could probably back into that if you gave me a little bit, but some people aren't like that.
I think it's a calculator online. It's like spend Jeff Bezos money or something, and you can go through and they have like $1 million yachts, all this stuff, and you can fill your cart with all these super high price
I've never
things.
seen that.
And it shows you just like with billions of dollars, you could buy. I mean, it's like the money never runs out. It's like you buy a $10 million yacht and you don't even see the money drop. It's kind of an interesting exercise.
And so I think for people that have saved a lot, they've not spent a lot, and that transition that happens, they end up coming to my office on the phone, a Zoom call, and they're either recently retired, getting ready to retire, and their income level is going to be in the 22 or 24% tax bracket. And I'm having to coach them on what's going to happen if they only take out a minimum amount or maybe none from the IRA because they're living on brokerage account money, and that continues to grow for 10 or 15 years. And what happens is the RMDs get out of hand, and we had an episode called the 6-figure RMD. And what happens is if they don't do something about it between that, age 60 and 75 window before RMDs begin, by the time they're in their 80s, they've kind of lost control of the IRA account or the 401k, and it ends up beginning to start pushing them into the 32% tax bracket because you add each of the spouses' Social Security, you add some of their extra needed income to live on, and then a 6-figure RMD. And we start to see in these Roth projection tools that I do that they start eclipsing into the 32% tax bracket. And so if you end up down the road having a IRA account jump from a 24% up to a 32%, that's a 8% difference. And I think some foresight and planning, just from a calculator perspective, can be defensible to consider maxing out a 24% tax bracket because it's only 2% more than the income level that you're at in a 22% tax bracket.
Right, absolutely. I think maybe the other landmine or the other thing to avoid, or maybe that people are trying to avoid, is IRMAA charges. So I think maybe people have heard of that. They've heard of friends paying on the golf course. I'm having to pay more for Medicare. And
riveting discussion on the back nine.
There's nothing like being a retiree. You've been on the golf course all day and talking IRMAA charges. But that's another thing to be mindful of. I actually just went through this with a client where they're really focused on leaving money for legacy, and so the Roth is the more favorable option. And so even though she's typically kind of the bottom of the 22% bracket, we did a larger conversion, pushed through an IRMAA charge. But really the first, and maybe I'll let you speak into this, that first level is not a huge hit. Now, if you move down the field to that third and fourth level of IRMAA, it's like, sheesh, that Medicare gets expensive quick.
Yeah.
But how do you help people think through? Does it make sense to push through that IRMAA threshold, or do we try to go up right to it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say if you're listening to this and you've thought about Roth conversions, you need to really heed this section of the podcast. If you do any digging, you're going to come across the 24% tax bracket, and be careful about the IRMAA charge that kicks in. We have tax planning software that I love, and for years we did this without tax planning software, and it was always so challenging. But let's say you're in the 22% married filing jointly tax bracket, and you're convinced this idea, hey, if I don't do something soon, I'm going to be in a situation where I could actually end up being in the 32% tax bracket, even if my investments only perform average over the rest of my life. You may be convinced that you want to take advantage of that 24% tax bracket, but what you're going to find is that the Medicare IRMAA penalty thresholds are not perfectly aligned with the 22 and 24% tax bracket. They are staggered throughout. And so oftentimes the goal with a client of ours will be, let's max out the 24% tax bracket, but we end up usually not maxing out the 24% tax bracket because of a punitive Medicare IRMAA charge threshold that is somewhere between where we are now and the top of that 24% tax bracket. And so if you're thinking about converting to Roth, it can be a surprise that ends up popping up with a letter 2 years into the future where they say, hey, you did a big Roth conversion in retirement, you're on Medicare, and so we're going to increase your Medicare IRMAA premiums. I don't think I have it on this page.
The first threshold I noticed $85 a month, so not the worst in the world, but it almost exponential from there into those last few sections.
And so it back to psychology. I found you guys with a lot of money in your investments, even though you can easily stomach, a Medicare premium that's 4 times the cost, nobody likes paying extra for Medicare. When your friends pay a lot less and you pay a lot more, it's a penalty that stings more than others. And so you don't want to unexpectedly, just by an error of not knowing where those IRMAA thresholds are, trigger that penalty. And so there's value in working through a Roth conversion strategy that acknowledges the painful penalty of going too far in your modified adjusted gross income. So that's for somebody that is on Medicare. And so where I'd want to pause here and take a little sidestep is, what if you're married? What if you're not married and you're still working? And you're already seeing, hey, I got $7 million between my IRA and my brokerage accounts and my Roth, and it's going to be hard for me to use all that money. And you're still working. You've got a high income level. Maybe you're in the 22, 24. Maybe you're in the 32%. Well, we need to acknowledge that because you're not on Medicare yet, you're not age 65, the IRMAA penalties do not apply to you yet. Or I've had one recently where somebody was Medicare age, but they've delayed signing up for Medicare because a younger spouse is still working, and so it provides this insulation from IRMAA charges because they're not yet paying for Medicare Part B or Part D, where these penalties come into play. And so everybody's situation is a little unique, but if you find yourself actually not exposed to the Medicare IRMAA charges left, now you really do have the opportunity to max out that 24% tax bracket, and it can further incentivize a Roth conversion for the person who is thinking about this before they turn 65. So, or even if you are past age 65 and a spouse is still working, you might be able to really convert more money to a Roth, which would be great.
Mm-hmm. This is, I feel like normally part of the show where I start talking about all the free resources we have on the website and people maybe tune out. But I think I found a way to loop this in so that people have to stick around and listen to us. But also we get to do a free plug. So how would you take our year-end tax planning checklist and tax return-driven financial planning, and how would you apply it? You said this the other day, that you're an opportunity identifier. So people that are doing it themselves, how can they be opportunity identifiers, maybe specifically using our year-end tax planning checklist, if they're in this 22 to 24% tax bracket? What are you looking for? What should they be looking for? And how can they use that free resource on the website?
Yep. So just last week, if you go to retirementtaxmatters.com, click on episodes. Today is April 9th. So on April 8th, episode 30, I think was last week, we called it April 16th, the opening day of tax planning. And so Adam and I are very passionate about this framework that we call advanced tax planning. And so in one sense, it's like a double entendre, like we want to go in deep, but really the literal meaning is you're doing tax planning in advance of the December 31st annual deadline. And so part of April of this year and April of next year and April of the following year, when you get your tax return filed and you get it back from your CPA, I believe the most important thing that many high net worth retirees aren't doing is making an income estimate projection in April for where they will end up in December. So if you've never done that before, you need to start doing it, and maybe you don't feel equipped to do it. You need to hire somebody to help you do that if you're in this $2 to $8 million range. And the idea behind having an income estimate in April is that you have this general idea of where your taxable income will land at the end of the year so that you can know how much you might consider accelerating future income from an IRA, a 401k, maybe it's a Roth contribution instead of a traditional IRA contribution. Maybe it's a 401k where you've been putting in pre-tax money and you elect to do Roth 401k tax money instead. But a way to accelerate future taxable income into the current year so that you can begin to max out this 22 or 24% tax bracket. So your question, how do we be an opportunity identifier? The first step is estimating your income. That's what a good financial planner does, and that's the beginning of this tax return driven process. And you come up with that estimate in April. Doesn't mean you actually have to execute it. I've had like 3 meetings this week where we've identified it, but we've also delayed the decision to do a Roth conversion until October because life is unpredictable. It's hard to know what's going to happen between now and then. And then in October is the time where you execute and you bring in that income into the current year. And I think that's really important to do.
Yeah, and I think that checking out that free resource on the website, if you've listened to any of our episodes or viewed any of our content and see any value in it, a lot of that is boiled down into that resource. And so go check it out. It's in the link down below in the descriptions. And I think even sometimes I'll put it in the comments. So feel free to jump in the comments and let us know 22, 24% tax bracket. Would you do a Roth conversion? What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, I want to add one more little thing here at the end. It's like, it's always the compliance disclaimer. One thing I really believe strongly is in what I do is that everybody's unique. And so there is going to be somebody that could chime in the comments. You could look around, and there's going to be a compelling case why you wouldn't want to do a Roth conversion up to the top of the 24% tax bracket. I'm speaking in a way that sometimes I don't like, which is like general rule of thumbs for people. But I think sometimes that's really helpful for a lot of people out there. But there have been times where I've not recommended clients to do a Roth conversion, and maybe all their money is in an IRA, and it just doesn't, they've got heavy income needs, and it's just not going to make a huge difference. There's not going to be money left over. And so I'm giving a slight asterisk here that some people, it's definitely going to mean not doing a Roth conversion up to the 24% tax level, because it may be true that when you retire, your income will be lower. But my experience has been for most high net worth retirees with a $2 to $8 million portfolio in that early season of retirement, thinking that your taxes are going to drop down to 12 or 15%, or that taxes will never increase in the future, or that beneficiaries would enjoy the process of inheriting a kind of complicated 10-year inherited IRA versus a Roth. There's some preconceived notions about that process that I would challenge you, not necessarily to commit immediately to Roth conversions, but to walk through that tax planning and financial planning process to see if it's a good fit for you.
Absolutely. Well, I think we'll call it quits here for the day. But you guys, thanks for logging in, listening to us. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, like, subscribe, follow, all the different things you can do there. But we appreciate you guys listening along, checking out our content, and downloading the free resource on the website. So we appreciate you guys. Hope you'll have a great rest of your day. I'm Adam Reed. This is Garrett Crawford. We're Retirement Tax Matters.
Thanks so much for listening to Retirement Tax Matters. As always, the ideas we share here are for educational purposes, and we do our best to get it right, but this isn't a substitute for specific tax or financial advice, because a truly effective strategy is always built around your personal situation. For more resources and to see our full disclosure, visit us at retirementtaxmatters.com.